Person to person.
We're live in Tel Aviv.
Our correspondents are following all aspects of this conflict.
This is what it's like to be in a country under attack.
Israel at war. Stay with CBS News for continuing coverage on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
You can't get answers in a tweet on Face the Nation. We try to separate the noise from the news. You need to be able to have an actual conversation.
I'm still running for speaker, and I plan to go to the floor and get the votes and win this race.
We need to make sure government still runs. And I think we should be having a resolution on the floor in support of Israel.
What I think we've seen in Ukraine is that there isn't a clear plan for the administration.
Hello, I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. Chaos and gridlock continue on Capitol Hill tonight, with disagreement inside the Republican Party over whether to expand powers for the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry of North Carolina. And there's a lot of will they or won't they confusion tonight about whether there will be another vote for Jim Jordan, a third ballot for that Speaker race. The chair of the House Judiciary Committee now says he will continue his quest to win the gavel. Jordan already, though, lost 2 Speaker votes this week. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now from Capitol Hill. Scott, thank you. Why is Jordan pushing for a third ballot if he knows the votes aren't there?
Not sure what the other exit ramp would be at this point, Bob. There was a raucous 4-hour House Republican meeting today in which they talked about this idea of temporarily expanding the powers and portfolio of Speaker pro tem Patrick McHenry. And that idea landed with a raucous thud in the room. It was dead on arrival. Republicans recognized pretty quickly they'd have to do a lot of outreach to Democrats to get that idea to pass. They'd have to partner with Democrats. And even though we're in a crisis of their making, they don't want to have Democrats help them escape this crisis. So the only path forward, they deem, is to have Jim Jordan try to swing the votes of at least 18 of 22 defectors. And there are climbs, there are uphill climbs, and then there are this type of mountainous climb that Jim Jordan faces trying to do so. He ended the afternoon meeting with some of them, but there's been no indication any of them are wavering.
So how long does this last? I mean, does Jordan just keep going to the floor like McCarthy did earlier this year and go ballot after ballot, hoping to wear them down? But a lot of these traditional Republicans don't seem ready to be even in a conversation about moving their vote.
This is so complex. First of all, because there is a level of exhaustion. And as they wander down this path as a Republican conference, they are leaving a trail of bad blood behind them. The animosity is rising. There are new factions forming, and a lot of this is getting personal. One Republican, Ken Buck of Colorado, told me today he doesn't think Jim Jordan's doing enough to tamp down the threats so many of these dissenters and defectors are getting, Ken Buck among them. And we've seen reports of death threats against some of these Republicans who've gone another way. Jordan has disavowed those threats, so has his staff, but they think he can do more to cool things off. I asked a sampling of Republicans late today what they think happens next. You'll hear the answers are less than clear.
So the resolution is dead on arrival.
Not enough support?
No. And it would be foolish for us to go to the floor without 217.
The other Republicans are saying the next step is for Jim Jordan to bring you and the others in a room and change your minds. No resolution to temporarily empower Mr. McHenry. How's that going to go?
Oh, I don't know. I think the next step is to go to the floor and have another vote, see where we are. And then he can figure out who the 20, 30, 40 are that are opposed and move forward from there.
You think there's more than 22?
I do think there's more than 22.
And Bob, there's obviously one key difference between this circumstance and Kevin McCarthy's circumstance. Every roll call vote exerts political pain on some of the moderates in swing districts who continue to support Jim Jordan. It wasn't true in the Kevin McCarthy case. Taking a real tough vote, so the more often you drag them out there for that vote, the more endangered some of these Republicans who stick with Jordan become.
Let's listen to what Congressman Jordan had to say to reporters earlier today.
We made the pitch to members on the resolution as a way to lower the temperature and get back to work. We decided that wasn't where we're going to go. I'm still running for speaker, and I plan to go to the floor and get the votes and win this race. but I want to go talk with a few of my colleagues. Particularly, I want to talk with the 20 individuals who voted against me.
So Jordan's still in, Scott, and just about 20, 30 seconds left here. If not Jordan, who?
Oh, if there was a name that we could offer, he or she would be the speaker already. They've been in this quagmire for days, knowing Jim Jordan had a real steep climb. I think you have to hit rock bottom sometimes before you open your mind broader. And it feels like after this day, maybe the next ballot, getting close to rock bottom.
They keep digging inside of the House Republican Conference. Scott McFarland, thank you. President Biden is set to address the nation tonight about the U.S. response to the wars in Israel and in Ukraine. CBS News has learned that the White House is preparing to ask Congress for about $100 billion over the next year as a supplemental. CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joins us now. Weijia, why is this speech significant in terms of getting that across the finish line in Congress?
Well, Robert, the president wants to make a direct appeal, not only to lawmakers, but to the American public. To stress that this funding is not only about supporting Israel and Ukraine, but it is a matter of national security. And so he will really try to hammer home the message of what happens if the aid stops flowing and how that could harm Americans and why people should be pushing and should be, calling up their lawmakers and getting involved and being engaged in this, because he will say it is a very delicate matter for people here at home as well. But as you guys have just been talking about, requesting funding is one thing. Getting it approved requires a functioning Congress. And we don't have that right now. I did ask sources whether he planned to mention or allude to the chaos on Capitol Hill, and they aren't expecting that, but certainly they'll be able to read between the lines when he talks about how critical this funding is.
Weijia, in terms of the top lines, what has the White House revealed, either publicly or behind the scenes, about how much of the $100 billion would go toward Israel, how much would go toward Ukraine? What are you learning about this distribution of the funding?
So sources close to the funding request have told me that about $60 billion would go toward Ukraine funding, at least $10 billion to Israel, which is the number that the country requested. And then the other remaining $30 billion would be spread across other priorities you see here, including border security and Indo-Pacific countries. And we have also learned that a significant part of the funds are expected to go to the Pentagon to replenish all the stockpiles that have been essentially drained because of all the aid that the U.S. has been providing to Ukraine. And so sources have also stressed nothing is final yet, because obviously there's a lot more work to do when you get down and dirty into the, line by line figures here. But that is what is becoming apparent as of now.
Weijia Jiang, always on top of the story at the White House. We appreciate your reporting in time. Thank you. And a quick programming note, the president's Oval Office address will be covered in depth tonight here on CBS starting at 8 p.m. Eastern. New CBS News polling, meanwhile, shows that Americans have mixed reactions to President Biden's approach to international conflicts, especially the war between Israel and Hamas. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, he joins us now to break it down. Anthony, tell us about how Americans are looking at the president's handling of what's going on between Israel and Hamas, this conflict, this war.
Sure. Good to talk to you, Bob. Look, start off with this. Now, Biden's approval on handling this conflict is just a few ticks higher than his overall approval, and it's net negative. And part of this is the partisan splits that you might expect to see, but I want to point this out, Bob. It's a little bit less partisan than you might otherwise expect, because you've got a third of Democrats who disapprove of how Biden's handling this. And Republicans, okay, this is not high at 28% approval, but it is higher than the way they approve of him overall or on a lot of other issues. Why is that? Well, you used the word in the intro, mixed. And there's a bit of a mix on what exactly people want Joe Biden to do. I think it's really interesting to set that up in anticipation of his talk tonight. There's 44% who say, okay, he's providing the right amount of support to Israel, but then the rest, well, should he provide more, right? Is he not providing enough? And a quarter who say he's providing too much. So which direction does that go? When you follow up with people and say, okay, if he's not providing enough, what should he do? They want him to criticize Hamas more, but then another half don't really have a firm answer. They say they just don't like his approach, and I think that it reflects a lot of the uncertainty in the situation, Bob.
Anthony, what did Americans tell CBS News polling about whether the United States should send weapons to Israel or not?
Yeah, mixture there, too. What should the U.S. do? You've got a strong majority saying, yes, send humanitarian aid to Israel. You've got another strong majority saying, use diplomacy. And part of underpinning that is that there's a widespread concern among Americans that this might lead to a wider conflict or that there might be terrorism back here in the U.S. So use of diplomacy, humanitarian aid to Palestinians in Gaza, a majority, not as high as for Israel, but notably not as much, more division on whether to send weapons and supplies to Israel. That gets division, humanitarian aid less so, Bob.
And quickly, in just about 30 seconds here, Anthony, what really stands out? What's your big takeaway? The
uncertainty that comes among Americans on what happens next. These big numbers, concern about a wider war, they underpin a lot of that mixture that you see in the rest of the opinions, Bob.
Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Next, we take you back to Capitol Hill to analyze the ongoing speaker stalemate with our panel. You're streaming America Decides.
Well, let me start with this.
This really happened.
Have you told the government?
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response? You want me to just
What's
keep
wrong
going?
with that argument?
What have you learned?
Do you know why?
Why? Why?
It's time for 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
So if we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
You had a substitute teacher that was pretty popular. What was his reputation?
Everyone loved him.
You had to miss a test. What did he offer to have you make up the test?
He said that I can come by after school was all over and just take the exam. The blinds were down. He closed the door. The next thing I knew, he was right next to me. That's when I realized what was going to happen. Even if I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, no one would hear me because no one was there. He told me that if I ever said anything to anyone, he would kill me, and he would kill my family. So I did it.
Pledge of Silence, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
He was there when the war in Ukraine started.
Extreme history. It's a big moment.
The extraordinary story behind Sean Penn's new Paramount Plus documentary, Superpower, when we go person to person.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
It can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Why did you miss the moment?
I'm not sure why they missed the moment.
It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. That means a civil conversation with perspective.
I like the idea of staying in there, take your jackets off, pack some lunches, get some bag lunches in here. We don't leave there until we get a speaker.
Welcome back to America Decides. That was Texas Republican Congressman Troy Nehls calling on his conference to elect a speaker immediately. Molly Ball and Katia Goba join us now. Molly is a senior political correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Katia is a politics reporter for Semaphore. Great to have you both here. Really appreciate it. Katia, we'll start with you. So when you look at the speaker's race, Jordan moving toward a third ballot, but maybe not. What's your read, talking to all your sources on Capitol Hill, about where this stands?
So there's about 22-ish holdouts right now. He's not gaining support. He said that he's going in back and behind closed doors to talk to these people, but you have like moderates from New York who are, trying to get like their SALT priorities, and then you have just people who are just not into a Jim Jordan speakership, mainly because they're upset about what happened to McCarthy and how Scalise was treated. So I don't see him gaining more traction. I just think that we inevitably will be going down the route of giving McHenry more powers with the help of Democrats at this point, because you already hear Republicans are saying they're not with it.
Molly, what's your latest reporting?
Well, the bedrock of opposition to Jim Jordan has been some of the appropriators, right? People like Kay Granger, the Cardinals, the subcommittee chairs from the Appropriations Committee, because they are the people that Jim Jordan has tortured for years. He has made their lives heck. And they don't want him to be speaker as a result. And they are not seeing anything from what I've been seeing and hearing that has made them any more excited about a Jim Jordan speakership in the last couple of days. They're only getting more dug in. He may have more no votes on a third ballot than he had on the second, and he had more on the second than he had on the first. At the same time, as Katia was just saying, this compromise plan has completely fallen apart. It's been declared dead. Jordan, who supported it this morning, has now walked away from it. So there's a feeling that we're almost back at square one, and nobody has any idea where it can go.
Katia, you've been reporting extensively on the right wing of the Republican Party. I've read your reporting for Semaphore. What's the outside pressure campaign at this moment to keep Jordan in the race versus maybe moving toward a consensus pick or toward empowering the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry?
So a lot of people are just blaming it on the base. There was reports that Miller Meeks was harassed, and some other members, some of their family members. There was one member who said they had to have a guard or some security by their child's school. But no member of Congress is taking claim about these harassment. They're mainly saying that the base is at fault here. And I mean, either way, it doesn't look good for a Speaker Jordan for things like this to be happening. And I will say, in terms of him pushing on appropriations, or there's also this idea about the aggression that's bubbling up here and how the conference is already divided. So here we have more people doubling down the right specifically for Jordan. I don't know where that leaves the other factions of the conference, and it just seems more divided here, which is why, like I keep saying, they're going to have to depend on Democrats at this point.
I heard CBS News heard that things got so tense today. Kevin McCarthy, the former speaker, was yelling at Matt Gaetz in this closed-door meeting among Republicans. What about Democrats? They're watching this from afar, maybe not too far away. You're a biographer of former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. How do you believe veteran Democrats like Pelosi, like Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader, are handling this moment? Are they going to ever maybe shed a few votes to get the House back on track?
The feeling among Democrats is that they can't dance if they haven't been asked. At the same time, they have made various formal proposals, whether it's Leader Jeffries or other Democrats who may have more relationships with Republicans across the aisle due to their membership in something like the Problem Solvers Caucus or their state delegations. But none of that has achieved any kind of formal standing, in part because Republicans have been very clear that they don't want it, and that any kind of collaboration with Democrats is seen as a red line. I think Democrats have gone over the last couple of weeks from sort of licking their chops at the chaos. Earlier this week, former Speaker Emerita Pelosi walked off the floor and said to reporters, well, they're out there learning to do math. And she was famous for her ability to count votes. And she was able to pull off a lot more with a majority exactly this narrow. At the same time, I think they've gone from sort of gleefully watching the other side burn to really being concerned about where this all goes if they can't get their act together.
Who are you watching beyond Patrick McHenry, the Speaker Pro Tem, beyond Jim Jordan? Could there be a Kevin Hern from Oklahoma, a Jody Arrington, Tom Cole from Oklahoma, Elise Stefanik from New York? Is there any candidate out there, a potential candidate you're watching as someone who in this storm could walk in and say it's time for a change?
Well, I have sources are telling me that the Texas delegation is planning on introducing or nominating Arrington. Not sure where that will go, because at the same time I heard there's 4 oppositions from the delegation about this idea. But also,
it's a strong delegation, though.
Yeah, it is. It's long, but if you have 4 people already in closed doors talking about opposing that, that's kind of like a dead-end situation, it seems to me. I know this is a dark horse, but a lot of people behind the scenes have floated Kathy McMorris Rodgers, and that'll be interesting to see. I'm still thinking that it's going to be a McHenry. I think Democrats are more comfortable with him. I just think Republicans had an opportunity to do this without Democratic help, coalescing around a McHenry without making concessions, and just to show you how fractured the conference is, they can't get it done.
Very quickly, who are you watching, Molly?
Well, I'm watching all of them. You know, I think another thing that you keep hearing, the person who keeps getting the most votes besides the nominee on the floor is Kevin McCarthy. And you had Mike Lawler from New York, one of those moderates, putting out a statement just a few minutes ago saying that we should nominate McCarthy again. He is the only Republican who's proven he can get 217 votes on the floor.
Molly Ball, got you go, but we really appreciate you coming by. Thank you so much. Come back again.
Thanks.
Appreciate it. As President Biden reaffirms American support for Israel, Russia and China are deepening ties. Next, we discuss why global divisions are deepening right now. You're streaming America Decides.
Our story's just begun.
Why did you want to share your story?
Water up this high? Where are these coming from?
That's the million-dollar question.
I'm a very curious person. I wake up every morning asking, what's happening in the world? Why is this happening? And how do we answer that question on the CBS Evening News?
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We aim every night to be factual and fair. That's our goal.
An original documentary from CBS Reports. Controversial Congressman George Santos.
Why won't you answer our questions?
How did he manage to get elected?
Thank you very much, and God bless you, and God bless the USA.
George Santos' campaign was a campaign of deceit, lies, fabrication.
And who is he, really?
I knew him as Anthony DeVolder from Queens.
Really, who he is, he's a fraud.
I compare him to the Tinder swindler.
From people who know him, the truth, the facts, the lies.
He would say that he was worth $100 million.
It's an incredibly cynical episode in American politics, beyond satire.
Had you ever seen anything like this?
No, and I hope I never see it again.
Campaign of Deceit, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Since childhood, she never stopped reaching for the skies. Now she's spent more time in space than any other American.
I like being a part of something bigger than me.
Peggy Whitson's extraordinary career as a history-making astronaut when we go person to person.
Feel the forecast on the CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell.
I think I asked direct questions. I don't know that they're tough questions per se. Why aren't you holding yourself to that standard? It doesn't look like Congress is doing anything. What has to happen? That's the role of Face the Nation, to focus on the issues at hand. And that means a civil conversation with perspective.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to America Decides. During President Biden's trip to Israel, Russian President Vladimir Putin was in Beijing. Putin met with Chinese leader Xi Jinping to reaffirm the partnership between the two countries. While President Biden has affirmed the American support for Israel, Russia and China have called for a ceasefire. Steve Inskeep joins us now. He is a host of NPR's Morning Edition. He is also the author of the terrific new book, Defer We Must, How Lincoln Succeeded in a Divided America. Steve, thanks so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Steve, you have spent a lot of this week talking to people, covering this conflict, analyzing this conflict. What is this moment like for the United States as well as for Israel and Palestinian leaders as they confront it?
I thought it was telling earlier this week when President Biden spoke in public during his visit to Israel, and maybe caution is not the word, but tried to offer words of wisdom to the Israelis about going too far, doing things that they would regret, as he said the United States had done after 9/11. The question is, how far is Israel willing to go? How many civilian casualties would become too many? I had an opportunity to talk with an Israeli cabinet minister just at the beginning of this conflict who said in advance, before being asked, civilians are going to be killed and the world just needs to accept it. I paraphrase here, but essentially he said this is inevitable and be prepared for it. He gets a warning then, or Israel gets a warning then from the president about whether you might go too far. These massive protests may not matter to the Israeli government now. They need to respond to their people, but at some point it becomes a serious problem for them and for the United States.
What's your assessment of where the United States is in terms of how long it could support Israel in this conflict?
Well, it seems to me that the United States would stick with Israel for a long time because it is a bipartisan matter. It is not peeling apart in quite the same partisan way that Ukraine is, for example. President Biden, even as he's sent these notes of caution, has emphasized the United States supports Israel. I don't think Israel's political support is in any particular danger, and the money is there, assuming that the House of Representatives gets together at some point to actually do its job.
I took a walk yesterday past the Lincoln Memorial, and I thought about your book, which is just a great read. And
thank you.
When you think about the divisions then under Lincoln, obviously civil war, high tension in the country, it's not directly comparable to what's happening on Capitol Hill in any way, but what are the lessons we could learn from your book and from Lincoln about how to interpret now?
Yeah, I mean, I think about this a lot because I realized that Abraham Lincoln did deal with people that he disagreed with. This book tells his life story through his meetings with 16 people that he differed with in some way. It didn't always succeed. Some of them went to war against him. But he understood that he didn't need to get everyone to agree. What he needed was a majority. That's what democracy is about. And it was interesting in your previous segment to hear the joke about the Republicans learning to count. They're trying to get to a majority, but they seem to have started this process of decapitating their leadership without knowing how they can get a majority for anybody else. That's the most basic thing. You can't get anything else done if you don't do that. That is a fundamental truth that Lincoln understood. And I'm sure that the Republicans trying to build a majority now would say they understand, but they got themselves in a position where they don't have it.
What was Lincoln's approach to differences of opinion that really set him apart from other leaders?
I think he didn't take things personally. Frederick Douglass, a great anti-slavery activist, publicly eviscerated Lincoln again and again and again, called him a racist, called him all kinds of things for being slow to act against slavery. Lincoln still took meetings from Douglass and they became friends, and they absolutely were allies in the cause. Lincoln didn't take it personally. He also didn't act like he was morally superior to people on the other side of the issue, even slave owners. He believed slavery was morally wrong, that the system needed to be destroyed, but he didn't say that it was a personal matter that made him need to virtue signal or show how he was better than the other person. And that sometimes did make it possible for him to deal with people who had very wrong beliefs, but he could get some value out of them for the country.
In just the final minute here, Steve, Are you confident when you look at the future, not just as a reporter, but as a historian?
Confident. Well, I'm confident there will be a future.
Okay, so pretty bleak.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. I mean, I have a certain amount of hope just because I take a long view, and I realize that things that seem terrible to us now may not turn out to be so. The Civil War was a terrible tragedy in which hundreds of thousands died, but it ended slavery and led to a more equal society. We're not going through that kind of extreme struggle now. We are going through struggles about what kind of a country we want to live in, and that could end up being for the better. We don't know, and we won't know for another decade or two or many.
Steve Inskeep, just great to have you here on set. We appreciate it, and congratulations on your new book.
Thanks.
Another accomplishment for Steve. That does it for our show today. Thanks for watching. You're streaming CBS News.
On Face the Nation, the way to learn is to listen.
We may have a recession.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.